Everyone in the church believed Mateo was a grieving son-in-law. They watched him bow his head, hold Linda's hand, and wipe false tears. People whispered that he was such a caring man. No one asked about Penelope. Miles away, she sat on the cold floor of a locked bedroom, watching her mother's funeral through a cracked phone screen. The video froze often, but she could still see enough to suffer. She pressed the phone to her chest and whispered, "Mama, forgive me." At the church, white flowers covered the casket while the choir sang softly. Mateo shook hands like a man carrying sorrow. Then Penelope saw something that made her gasp. Linda was wearing her black funeral dress, the one bought for her final goodbye. No one noticed the daughter was missing. Before sunrise, Penelope woke from a night without sleep. The house felt empty without her mother's morning footsteps. She sat on the bed staring at the wall, then reached for the black dress hanging behind the door. "This is for you, Mama," she whispered. She had bought it from a second-hand shop and prayed it would make her look strong enough to bury the woman who raised her. At exactly 7:15, the bedroom door opened. Mateo walked in without knocking. He took the dress from the hanger and folded it over his arm. "What are you doing?" she asked. "You're not going." Her throat tightened. "Today is my mother's funeral," he answered coldly. "You've been too emotional. I won't let you embarrass me." He walked out, and the lock clicked outside. Penelope ran to the door screaming, "Mateo!" Penelope pulled the handle until her hands hurt. "Open this door," she shouted, but no answer came. She pounded again, then heard the car engine fade away. Silence returned like a cruel joke. She searched the room for help. The windows were nailed shut. There was no spare key and no escape. Then she remembered her old phone hidden inside a shoebox beneath blankets. Mateo believed it was gone. With shaking hands, she found it and turned it on. The battery was low, but alive. She searched online until she found a cousin streaming the funeral. There was the church. There was her mother's casket. There were her children in the front row. And there was Linda sitting beside Mateo like a wife. Penelope covered her mouth to stop a scream. "My babies," she whispered. The pastor said, "Family, please rise." Linda stood. Mateo stood beside her. Even Penelope's children rose, confused and quiet. Penelope bent forward and cried soundlessly on the bathroom floor. At church, women whispered kindly to Linda, saying she was handling everything so well and calling her poor dear. Penelope laughed bitterly through tears. The wrong woman received sympathy while the real daughter was locked away. She watched every prayer, every hymn, and every handful of dirt. When the casket lowered into the ground, she touched the cracked screen. "I'm here, Mama," she whispered. "I'm still here." No one in that church asked where Rose's daughter had gone. No one noticed she was missing. And that hurt almost as much as the betrayal itself. After the burial, people gathered outside in soft conversation. Mateo moved among them like an actor after applause. He sighed at the right times and accepted condolences with lowered eyes. The funeral director approached carrying a cream-colored envelope. "This is for Penelope," he said. Mateo reached for it, but the man held it back. Her mother asked that she receive it herself. Mateo replied smoothly, "My wife is resting. I'll give it to her." The man hesitated, then released it. Linda leaned closer and asked, "What's inside?" Mateo shrugged. "Probably nothing." At home, he hid the envelope in the bottom drawer of his office desk beneath old papers. That night, Penelope asked softly, "Was anything left for me?" Mateo loosened his tie and answered, "No, nothing at all." To understand Penelope, a person had to know where she came from. She was raised in a small Georgia town where roads turned to dirt after the gas station and everybody knew your name before you spoke. Her mother, Rose, cleaned houses for rich families for more than 30 years. She woke before dawn, took 2 buses into the city, and returned home after sunset with tired feet and a warm smile. Every night she kissed Penelope's forehead and said, "Never let anyone make you feel small." Rose owned little, but she carried herself like a queen. She had 3 church dresses, one pair of good shoes, and a jar of coins labeled someday. Yet the one treasure she valued most was her daughter, and she poured every ounce of strength into raising her to stand tall. When Penelope turned 16, Rose gave her a thin gold bracelet. It had cost nearly a full day's wages from a pawn shop years earlier. Rose fastened it around her wrist and said, "This is all I have worth giving, but one day it will remind you who you are." Penelope tried to refuse, but Rose shook her head. "No, baby. Some things are not measured by price." Penelope never removed it. She wore it through school, through heartbreak, through marriage. Years later, Matteo laughed at the bracelet and called it cheap. His mother, Helen, would stare at it in silence as if it offended her eyes. But whenever Penelope touched the bracelet, she felt Rose beside her, steady and strong, whispering that worth cannot be bought. Penelope met Matteo in college. He was handsome, polished, and confident. He knew how to make a room laugh and how to make a woman feel chosen. He bought flowers, opened doors, and spoke about dreams as if success already belonged to him. "I'll take care of you," he told her one evening beneath campus lights. No one had ever promised her that before. She believed him. They married young. Penelope left school 2 semesters before graduation so Matteo could build his real estate career. "You can finish later," he said. Later never came. At first he was loving. Then he became busy. Then distant. The changes were small enough to ignore until they became her whole life. By the time she noticed, she was married to a stranger wearing the face of the man she once loved. Matteo's family never truly accepted her. Helen treated Penelope politely in public and like hired help in private. She asked her to wash dishes during family dinners while others laughed in the next room. Matteo's sister, Alabama, delivered insults wrapped in smiles. "You're lucky Matteo chose you," she once said while adjusting her pearls. Matteo never defended his wife. He only looked away. Over the years, Penelope became invisible inside her own marriage. She cooked every meal, cleaned every room, and raised 2 children with patience. Matteo stopped asking about her day. He stopped touching her shoulder when he passed by. He stopped seeing her at all. Still, she stayed because she believed marriage meant endurance. She thought love required sacrifice. She did not yet understand that love should never feel like erasing yourself. What no one knew was that Rose had been building something in silence for 40 years. In the early 1980s, she worked for a young businesswoman named Williams, who treated her with unusual kindness. Williams invited Rose to sit at the table for lunch instead of standing in the kitchen. She remembered birthdays and asked about Penelope's schooling. When Williams started a small technology company from her garage, she did something shocking. She gave Rose a share in the business. "You helped me more than you know," Williams said. Rose did not fully understand stocks or ownership then, but she trusted the woman. She kept the documents hidden in a fireproof box beneath her bed. She never changed her simple life. She just kept working, kept saving, and quietly updated her will with one name written again and again, Penelope. As the years passed, Williams's little company grew into something the world could no longer ignore. What began in a garage became a global empire. Stocks split, dividends multiplied, and new properties were added to trusts Rose barely understood. Yet she asked questions, listened carefully, and signed every paper with steady hands. She never told neighbors, church friends, or even Penelope. By day, she still scrubbed floors and folded towels in other people's houses. By night, she studied letters from lawyers under a kitchen lamp. When people pitied her, Rose only smiled. They saw worn shoes and bus rides. They did not see the fortune gathering quietly behind her name. She wanted one thing only, that her daughter would one day live beyond the reach of cruel people. A week after the funeral, Penelope was scrolling through her phone when she found a photo that froze her blood. Linda stood beside Rose's casket wearing Penelope's black dress. One manicured hand rested on polished wood. The caption read, "Family is everything. Rest easy, Mama Rose." Matteo had liked the post. Alabama had commented 3 crying faces. Helen had left a heart. Penelope stared until the letters blurred. "Mama Rose," she whispered. The woman had never met her mother. She had never sat by Rose's bedside or brought soup when she was sick. Yet there she was, claiming grief like borrowed jewelry. Penelope set the phone down carefully. She did not cry this time. Some hurts move past tears and settle somewhere colder. That Sunday, Matteo went to Helen's house for dinner. Penelope was not invited. "You need rest," he said, buttoning his shirt as if concern lived in his voice. She sat alone in the silent house listening to the clock tick. At dinner, Alabama laughed and said, "Penelope has been unstable for months." Helen sliced roast beef and replied, "I warned Matteo he married beneath himself." Everyone chuckled softly. Matteo said nothing. Linda rubbed his shoulder and poured him more wine. "You deserve peace," she whispered. He smiled. Back at home, Penelope stared at the dark television screen. She imagined their laughter traveling through the walls. For the first time, shame turned into something sharper. Not rage. Not yet. But the beginning of refusal. Penelope asked about the envelope 3 times. The first time, Matteo waved his hand. "Just church paperwork." The second time, he frowned. "Why are you obsessed with nonsense?" The third time, she stood in his office doorway and said, "My mother wrote my name on it. I want to see it." Matteo rose slowly from his chair. "Your mother had nothing," he snapped. "Whatever she left isn't worth the paper." He opened a drawer, then shut it hard enough to make her flinch. "Let it go." Penelope backed away, but something inside her had changed. She no longer believed his anger meant strength. It looked smaller now, like fear wearing a loud voice. That night, while changing the sheets, Penelope found a gold earring with a tiny red stone buried in the bed linen. It was not hers. She held it in her palm for a long time. Then she placed it on the nightstand and sat down quietly. No shouting. No broken glass. No questions. She already knew the answers. Her fingers closed around Rose's bracelet. "Mama," she whispered, "I don't know how much more I can take." She slept badly and dreamed of Rose standing in a field wearing her navy church dress. Rose lifted the bracelet toward sunlight and smiled without speaking. When Penelope woke, the numbness was gone. In its place burned a steady little flame. 2 days later, Matteo left the house saying he had meetings. Penelope watched his car disappear, then walked straight to his office. Sunlight stretched across the floor like a path waiting for her. She opened the bottom drawer, moved aside folders, and found the cream-colored envelope. Her hands trembled when she saw Rose's careful handwriting. She sat on the floor before opening it. Inside was a 3-page letter, a legal packet, and financial statements covered in numbers so large they looked unreal. She read them once, then again, then a third time. Her breath caught. Everything Rose had built, every share, trust, property, and investment, had been left to one person. Her. Penelope pressed the papers to her chest and cried without shame. She unfolded Rose's letter first. The pages smelled faintly of lavender and old paper. Rose wrote of long bus rides, sore knees, and prayers whispered while scrubbing other people's floors. She wrote of Williams's kindness and the fortune that grew in silence. She wrote, "I cleaned their houses so you would never have to beg inside one." Then the last lines made Penelope weep openly. "Wear the bracelet. Stand tall. And never let anyone lock a door on you again." Penelope touched the thin gold band on her wrist. For years she thought it was all her mother had left. Now she understood it had always been more than jewelry. It was instruction. Penelope did not confront Matteo that evening. She cooked dinner, served plates, and asked if he wanted more bread. He never noticed her calmness had changed shape. Over the next weeks, she used a hidden phone to contact Rose's attorneys. She met them downtown while Matteo believed she was shopping for groceries. In quiet conference rooms, she signed documents, transferred assets into protected trusts for her children, and began divorce proceedings. She created a foundation in Rose's name for children of cleaners, nannies, cooks, and janitors. Then she returned home in time to fold Matteo's shirts exactly the way he liked. Collar down. Sleeves tucked. He mistook discipline for defeat. Mateo bragged to Linda one night at a rooftop bar. "She's finally broken," he said, swirling ice in his drink. "She won't be a problem anymore." Linda laughed. She was never a problem. They clinked glasses to a future already collapsing under them. At home, Penelope sat by the window reviewing legal updates with steady eyes. Every signature was in place. Every account was secured. Every lie had become evidence. She no longer waited for kindness. She planned with precision. For the first time in years, silence belonged to her, not to fear. Each year, Helen hosted a grand charity gala for Atlanta society. Politicians, pastors, business owners, and wealthy families filled the ballroom with perfume and practiced generosity. This year, one instruction was clear: Penelope was not invited. Alabama personally removed her name from every list. Mateo arrived with Linda on his arm. Helen kissed them both at the entrance. Chandeliers glowed above silver tables while cameras flashed near the stage. Everyone believed the family image remained polished and whole. Then the front doors opened. Penelope entered wearing a simple white gown, Rose's bracelet shining on her wrist. Two attorneys walked beside her, along with the estate representative. Conversations stopped one table at a time. The silence spread across the ballroom in waves. Glasses paused halfway to lips. Forks hovered above plates. Mateo turned and lost all color in his face. Linda's hand slipped from his arm. Helen whispered, "What is she doing here?" Alabama could not answer. Penelope did not hurry. She walked with straight shoulders and calm eyes, as if she had always belonged in every room they tried to keep from her. Rose's bracelet caught the chandelier light with each step. She reached the stage, took the microphone, and looked over the crowd. No apology lived in her posture. No fear remained in her voice. "My name is Penelope," she said softly, and the room leaned closer to listen. "Most of you do not know me," she continued, "and that was by design." Her words were gentle, but each one landed sharply. "For years I was easier to hide than to respect." She paused and touched the bracelet. 3 weeks ago, my mother Rose was buried. She worked as a housekeeper for 30 years. She rode 2 buses to jobs that kept other families comfortable. She wore the same church dresses until the seams thinned. Yet she was the strongest person I have ever known. The ballroom stayed motionless. Helen's smile had vanished completely. Mateo clenched his jaw. Penelope lifted her eyes and spoke with steady clarity. "On the day of her funeral, I was locked inside my bedroom by my husband." A gasp moved through the room. Penelope continued. "He took the dress I bought to bury my mother in and gave it to another woman. He drove her in my car. He seated her in my place. He let her stand when the pastor said, 'Family, please rise.'" Linda stepped back from Mateo as if distance might erase her part in it. Alabama stared at the floor. Helen gripped the table edge with both hands. "And while all of you offered sympathy," Penelope said, "the real daughter watched through a cracked phone screen from a locked room." No one interrupted. Shame had entered the room and chosen many seats. "But my mother left me something," Penelope said, lifting the cream-colored envelope. "Something my husband dismissed without opening." She nodded to the estate representative, who stepped forward with documents. "Rose, the woman many of you pitied, built wealth in silence through wisdom, patience, and discipline." The representative handed a summary sheet to the event coordinator. The woman read it, then looked up wide-eyed. Whispers broke out like sparks in dry grass. Penelope did not announce the number. She did not need to. Faces around the room changed on their own. Mateo's mouth opened slightly, but no words came. He had hidden treasure because he believed it came from poor hands. Penelope turned toward Mateo. "You told me my mother had nothing," she said. Her voice never rose. "You told me whatever she left behind was worthless." She let the silence rest on him. "She had more than you could imagine, and she gave it all to the woman you locked in a room." Then she placed the microphone down and walked off the stage. No tears. No backward glance. Cameras flashed too late to catch the moment properly. Guests began whispering names, numbers, scandals, and apologies they would never say aloud. Mateo remained frozen beside Linda. Helen looked suddenly old. Alabama reached for water with trembling fingers. Penelope exited the ballroom exactly as she entered, upright, composed, and untouchable. The fallout came quickly. Penelope's attorneys finalized the divorce within weeks. Mateo fought every paper served to him. He hired expensive lawyers, demanded part of the inheritance, and claimed emotional suffering. None of it worked. Rose's assets had already been secured in trusts before the filings began. Every document was airtight. Every move had been made quietly and legally. When the judgment came, Mateo received nothing beyond what was already in his own name. He walked out of court pale and furious. Outside, reporters called his name, but he kept moving. The man who once loved public attention now hid from it like daylight. His real estate business began collapsing soon after. Investors withdrew one by one. Partners stopped returning calls. Clients chose other firms rather than tie themselves to scandal. Within 3 months, half his office stood empty. Mateo sat alone at a polished desk, staring at a silent phone. He called Penelope 17 times over 2 weeks. She never answered. His voicemails began with anger and ended in pleading. "We can fix this," he said in one. "You owe me a conversation," he said in another. She deleted each message after the first sentence. He had mistaken access for ownership, and now both were gone. Linda disappeared the moment status did. While Mateo tried saving his business, she packed a suitcase and left the apartment. No note. No explanation. She changed her number, removed the funeral photo, and blocked him everywhere. Months later, Alabama told him with casual cruelty she was seeing a developer from Houston before the gala. Mateo sat in the quiet apartment absorbing the insult. It did not feel like heartbreak. It felt like humiliation. He had destroyed his marriage for a woman who saw him as temporary furniture in a nicer room. Helen tried to repair what pride had broken. She sent Penelope a message. "We should talk. We are still family." 3 days later, Penelope replied, "You called me beneath your family. You watched another woman take my place at my mother's funeral. You laughed while my name became a joke. I wish you well, but we are not family. We never were." Helen read the message several times and found no answer. Invitations to her dinners declined. Church friends grew distant. Even Alabama moved away and stopped calling. For the first time, Helen learned what loneliness sounded like inside a large house. Penelope did not buy a mansion or a yacht. She bought a warm house near the coast with wide windows and morning light across wooden floors. She planted tomatoes, herbs, and sunflowers like Rose once did. Her children visited every weekend. They ate at a round table with no assigned seats and no fear in the room. They spoke of school, music, and memories of Rose humming softly in the kitchen. Penelope laughed more in those evenings than she had in the last 10 years of marriage. Peace entered her life quietly and stayed. Soon after settling by the coast, Penelope opened the Rose Harris Community Foundation. It offered scholarships to children of housekeepers, janitors, cooks, nannies, and home health aides. "My mother cleaned homes," she said at the opening ceremony. "This foundation will help build futures." Within a year, hundreds of families had received support. Within 2 years, the program reached several states. She refused to place her own name on the building. Above the entrance, gold letters simply read Rose Harris. Whenever people praised Penelope, she smiled and answered, "My mother planted this long before I arrived." On a quiet spring afternoon, Penelope drove alone to the cemetery carrying fresh sunflowers. She placed them beside Rose's headstone and sat in the grass with folded legs like she had as a child in her mother's kitchen. Wind moved softly through the trees. She rested her hand on the cool stone. "I stood tall, Mama," she said. "I wore the bracelet, and I did not let them keep the door locked." Tears came, but they were gentle tears now, not broken ones. They washed memory clean instead of reopening wounds. She stayed until the sky turned gold, then pink, then deep purple. In that fading light, Penelope understood something she had missed for years. Peace does not come from revenge. It does not come from watching others fall. It comes from standing fully inside the life meant for you after others tried to shrink it. Every insult, every stolen dress, every locked door, every sleepless night had led her here, to freedom no one could touch. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply. For the first time in many years, the air felt completely her own. Some people do not only hurt you, they try to rewrite your place in your own story. They sit in your chair, wear your clothes, and speak your name as if it never carried weight. Often the world believes them because silence can look like surrender. But silence is sometimes preparation. One day the same room that erased you may be forced to watch you return. Not louder, not crueler, but stronger than their memory of you. Penelope learned that dignity can outlast deception, and truth does not need to shout to win. She walked away free, and no one could take that from her again.